Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The vacation that took a dark turn. The Anderson family had been counting down the days to their long overdue vacation. Nathan Anderson, a seasoned FBI agent, had spent years immersed in high-stakes investigations, uncovering hidden truths and protecting communities. His work, though fulfilling, often consumed his time, leaving little room for family moments. His wife, Vanessa, a celebrated human rights attorney, was equally dedicated to her cause, fiercely defending those marginalized by society. Between their demanding careers, moments of peace were fleeting. This vacation was supposed to be different. For once, Nathan and Vanessa decided to pause the whirlwind of their professional lives to focus on their children, Lucas and Mia. The destination: a prestigious oceanfront resort where golden sands met turquoise waves, and the world seemed to stand still. As they arrived, the Andersons marveled at the grandeur of the resort. Towering palm trees swayed lazily in the sea breeze, and the air was filled with the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Lucas, their curious 13-year-old, immediately ran towards the beach, his adventurous spirit leading the way. 7-year-old Mia followed closely, her laughter ringing out like a melody. Nathan and Vanessa exchanged a look of contentment as they settled by the pool. Nathan reclined on a sun lounger, his usual sharp suit replaced by a casual polo shirt and shorts. Vanessa, radiant in her sundress, opened a novel she'd been meaning to read for months. For the first time in a long while, the weight of their responsibilities felt far away. However, this serenity was short-lived. Nathan's attention was drawn to a man approaching them, a security guard. The guard, clad in a dark uniform and sunglasses, walked with an air of authority. His expression was polite yet tinged with something Nathan had seen too often: suspicion. "Excuse me, sir," the guard began, his tone firm but measured. "Can I ask for your room number? Just a routine check." Nathan lowered his sunglasses, meeting the guard's gaze. "We're in room 402, he replied calmly. "Is there an issue?" The guard hesitated for a moment before responding. "No issue, sir. It's just protocol." Vanessa looked up from her book, her sharp instincts immediately sensing the underlying tension. "Protocol?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with skepticism. "We've been here since yesterday and haven't seen anyone else being questioned. Why us?" The guard shifted uncomfortably but didn't waver. "Ma'am, we've had incidents with unauthorized visitors. This is standard procedure." Nathan, recognizing the subtle dance of words that often cloaked prejudice, chose to remain composed. "Feel free to verify with the front desk," he said. "We'll be right here." The guard nodded, but his departure did little to ease the tension. Vanessa placed her hand on Nathan's arm, her expression a mix of frustration and concern. "They're targeting us," she said softly. Nathan exhaled, a deep sigh that carried years of similar experiences. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said, though he knew her instincts were rarely wrong. Minutes later, the guard returned, this time accompanied by a colleague. Their demeanor had shifted, more rigid, more authoritative. "Sir," the first guard said, his tone less polite than before, "we need you and your family to leave the pool area or we verify your information with the front desk." Vanessa stood up, her eyes flashing with indignation. "This is unacceptable. We've done nothing wrong, and you're treating us like criminals." The second guard, younger and visibly more assertive, crossed his arms. "We're just following protocol, ma'am. If you cooperate, this will be resolved quickly." Nathan rose slowly, his towering frame exuding calm authority. "Let me make something clear," he said, his voice steady but commanding. "We are paying guests at this resort. My family deserves the same respect as anyone else here." The younger guard smirked. "Respect is earned," he muttered under his breath. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly, though his own patience was wearing thin. The guards escorted the Andersons out of the pool area, their actions drawing the attention of other guests. Whispers rippled through the crowd, their curious gazes adding to the humiliation. Lucas and Mia clung to their parents, their confusion and fear evident. As they reached the resort lobby, the manager approached, his expression one of surprise and concern. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking between the guards and the Andersons. The first guard spoke quickly, eager to justify their actions. "We were conducting a routine check. Their presence seemed suspicious." "Suspicious," Vanessa repeated, her voice rising. "We've done nothing but enjoy our vacation. Is that suspicious to you?" The manager's face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I deeply apologize for this misunderstanding," he said. "I assure you, this is not how we treat our guests." Nathan, though outwardly composed, fixed the guards with a penetrating gaze. "A misunderstanding is when someone accidentally bumps into you," he said. "This was deliberate." The manager began to stammer an explanation, but Nathan held up a hand to stop him. "I want this resolved," he said, "and I want an explanation for why my family was singled out." The guards, now visibly uncomfortable, avoided Nathan's gaze. The truth, Nathan suspected, was something they were unwilling to admit. As the Andersons returned to their room, the joyous atmosphere of their vacation had been shattered. Nathan and Vanessa sat in silence, their children huddled close. "This isn't over," Vanessa said finally, her voice firm. Nathan nodded, his mind already working through the next steps. The injustice they faced was personal, but it was also part of a much larger issue, one they couldn't ignore. The truth behind the uniform. That evening, the Anderson family sat together in their suite, the air heavy with a silence that felt louder than words. The incident at the pool had rattled them all. Lucas sat on the bed with his arms crossed, staring down at his feet. Mia, the youngest, clung to her mother's arm, sensing that something was wrong but not fully understanding. "Why do those men think we weren't supposed to be here?" Lucas finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was sharp with frustration, his teenage innocence bruised. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Nathan before answering. "Sometimes people judge others based on how they look instead of who they are," she said gently. "That's not fair," Lucas replied angrily. "We didn't do anything wrong." "You're right," Nathan said, his deep voice calm but resolute. "But sometimes people let that ignorance guide their actions. That's not on us, that's on them." Vanessa placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder, knowing how difficult it was for him to remain calm when confronted with injustice. "We're going to handle this, but for tonight, let's focus on being together," she said, trying to shift the atmosphere. But Nathan wasn't ready to let it go. As his family settled in for the night, he slipped out onto the balcony, his mind racing. The ocean waves crashed in the distance, but the sound did little to soothe him. Years of FBI training had taught him to analyze every detail, and his gut told him there was more to this incident than just a misunderstanding. Nathan's mind wandered back to the moment at the pool, how the younger guard had smirked, the disdain dripping from his words. "Respect is earned," he had said. Nathan clenched his jaw, the memory igniting a spark of anger he rarely allowed to surface. He pulled out his phone and dialed a trusted colleague, Agent Marcus Heller, who also happened to be one of his oldest friends. Marcus picked up on the first ring. "Nate, what's up? Aren't you supposed to be on vacation?" Marcus's voice was light, but Nathan's tone quickly wiped the humor away. "We had an incident today," Nathan said, explaining the events at the pool. "It's bothering me, Marcus. The way those guards approached us, that tone, the younger one especially, it felt deliberate. I don't think this was random." Marcus sighed on the other end. "You want me to look into it?" "Yeah. I want to know who's working security here. Something's off." "I'm on it. I'll run a background check on the guards and the security company that contracts with the resort," Marcus replied. "Sit tight, man. I'll get back to you." Nathan hung up and returned inside, though his unease lingered. Vanessa noticed immediately. You called someone, she said, her eyes narrowing. I did, Nathan admitted. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Vanessa's expression softened. I know. Just promise me you'll try to enjoy the rest of this trip. We can't let people like that ruin everything. Nathan nodded, though deep down, he knew he wouldn't be able to rest until he uncovered the truth. The next day, confrontation and discovery. The following morning, the Andersons decided to put the incident behind them, or at least pretend to, for the sake of Lucas and Mia. After breakfast, they made their way to the beach, hoping to recapture some of the joy that had been stolen from their trip. Lucas and Mia ran ahead, racing each other to the water's edge, their laughter once again filling the air. Nathan and Vanessa walked hand in hand behind them, their feet sinking into the warm sand. But peace would not last for long. As they set up their chairs near the shoreline, Nathan noticed two familiar figures patrolling the beach, the same guards from yesterday. The younger one, whose name tag read Bryce, spotted them and nudged his colleague. Nathan's sharp eyes caught the interaction. Bryce said something under his breath, and both men smirked. Vanessa saw it too. They're watching us, she whispered, her voice tight. Nathan exhaled deeply. Let them watch. But Bryce didn't stop at watching. After a few minutes, he approached the family again, this time alone. His posture was arrogant, his expression smug. Morning, folks, Bryce said, his tone mockingly cheerful. Hope you're enjoying your stay. Nathan remained seated, his gaze unwavering as he looked up at the guard. Is there something you need? Bryce shrugged. Just making sure everything's in order. You know, can't be too careful. Vanessa stood up, her patience finally snapping. Enough. We've answered your questions, we've shown you nothing but respect, and you're still harassing us. Why? Because you don't think we belong here. Bryce's smirk widened, and for a split second, he let his guard down. People like you don't usually stay at places like this, he muttered. Silence. Nathan stood slowly, towering over Bryce. People like us, he repeated, his voice low but filled with power. You don't know a damn thing about my family, but let me educate you. Bryce's smirk faltered. I'm Nathan Anderson. Nathan continued, his FBI badge suddenly in his hand. The sunlight glinted off the gold surface as he held it up. Special Agent Nathan Anderson, FBI. Bryce's face turned pale. You've been harassing my family for 2 days. You profiled us, humiliated us, and treated us like criminals. And now you're going to answer for it, Nathan said, his voice calm but deadly serious. At that moment, the older guard approached, looking panicked. Sir, we didn't. Save it, Nathan said sharply. I want to speak to your supervisor, now. Guests on the beach were beginning to stare, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Bryce opened his mouth to argue, but Nathan's unwavering stare silenced him. The guards retreated quickly, scrambling to call their superior. The supervisor arrives. Minutes later, the head of resort security, a tall man in his 50s named Gregory Nils, arrived on the scene. His demeanor was professional, but his expression betrayed his concern as Nathan recounted the events of the past 2 days. Mr. Anderson, I sincerely apologize, Gregory said. This is unacceptable. I assure you, we have strict policies against discrimination, and I will personally investigate this matter. I want more than words, Mr. Mills, Nathan said. I want accountability. Gregory nodded solemnly. You have my word. Those responsible will face consequences. As the guards were led away, Bryce cast one last glance at Nathan, a mix of resentment and fear in his eyes. Nathan watched him go, his jaw tight. Vanessa placed her hand on his arm. You did the right thing, she said quietly. I hope so, Nathan replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But this fight isn't over. The investigation begins. The resort was quiet that afternoon, but for the Andersons, the silence was deceptive, a calm before the storm. Vanessa had taken Mia and Lucas back to their room, hoping to distract them with board games and snacks, but Nathan had other plans. He wasn't ready to let this go. Nathan sat on the balcony of their suite, his laptop open, files scattered across the small table. Agent Marcus Heller had come through, sending him an encrypted folder containing the results of his investigation into the resort's security staff. Bryce Carson, Nathan muttered as he clicked open the file. The younger security guard's name stared back at him in bold letters. Nathan scrolled through Bryce's background. On paper, the man seemed qualified, military experience, a clean record. But there were red flags, things only someone like Nathan would catch. Bryce had been dismissed from his previous job as a mall security guard, the reason listed as conflict with management. Nathan dug deeper and found a complaint filed by a group of minority employees who had accused Bryce of harassment and racially charged behavior. The complaint had quietly disappeared, likely buried under bureaucracy, but it painted a clear picture of the man Nathan had confronted. "I knew it," Nathan said aloud, his voice low. The older guard, Samuel Vance, was less problematic, longtime security officer with an otherwise clean history. But his silence during the incident was telling. Nathan had seen it before, bystanders too afraid to challenge those in the wrong. It didn't make him guilty, but it didn't absolve him either. Nathan's phone buzzed, pulling in from his thoughts. It was Marcus. "Tell me you found something," Nathan said as he picked up. "Oh, I found something all right," Marcus replied, his voice serious. "The security company that contracts with the resort. You're going to love this. It's run by a guy named Paul Simmons. He's got a history with allegations of discriminatory hiring practices and bias training violations." Nathan leaned back in his chair, processing the information. "So this goes deeper than just Bryce." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "It's systemic. The whole security team probably operates under the same toxic culture. Simmons has settled multiple lawsuits over the years, but he's slippery, always manages to stay just within legal limits." Nathan rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "That explains a lot. I'll handle it from here. Thanks, Marcus." "You sure you don't want backup?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with concern. "You're supposed to be on vacation." Nathan smirked. "Yeah, well, that ship sailed. I'll keep you updated." As he hung up, Vanessa stepped out onto the balcony, her expression equal parts curious and concerned. "What are you digging into now?" Nathan turned the laptop screen toward her, showing the files. "The security company. It's not just about Bryce. This entire operation is built on a culture of bias and intimidation." Vanessa's brow furrowed as she scanned the documents. "It's always the same, isn't it? People like this think they can act however they want because no one will hold them accountable." "Well, they've picked the wrong family this time," Nathan said, his voice firm. "This doesn't end here." Vanessa sat beside him, her eyes narrowing. "So what's the plan?" The confrontation with management. The following morning, Nathan requested a meeting with Gregory Mills, the head of security, and the resort manager, Helen Crow. The meeting took place in the manager's office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. The serene view was a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Helen Crow, a polished woman in her 50s, greeted Nathan and Vanessa with a polite but distant smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I want to start by apologizing again for what happened. This resort prides itself on providing a welcoming environment for all guests." Nathan's face remained expressionless as he placed a folder on the table. "Miss Crow, I don't think you fully understand the scope of the problem here." Helen's smile faltered. "I assure you." Nathan cut her off. "This isn't about one bad apple on your security team. Your resort contracts with Simmons Security. That's a company with a documented history of bias and discriminatory behavior." Gregory Mills, seated beside her, shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't aware." "You weren't aware?" Nathan said sharply, his gaze cutting through the man. "You're the head of security, and you didn't vet the people working for you." Helen turned to Gregory, her expression hardening. Is this true? Gregory fumbled for words. We followed standard procedures when hiring them. There were no immediate red flags. That's because they bury their mistakes, Nathan said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. But I don't bury anything. Bryce Carson has a history of harassment. He shouldn't be working security anywhere, let alone at a resort where families are supposed to feel safe. Helen leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking much less composed. What are you suggesting we do, Mr. Anderson? I'm suggesting you take responsibility, Nathan replied. Fire Bryce Carson. Investigate your security team. Terminate your contract with Simmons Security. If you don't, I'll make sure this story gets out, publicly. Helen's face paled. Is that a threat? No, Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp. It's a promise. My husband works for the FBI. I'm a lawyer. We know how to get justice, legally and publicly. Gregory Mills spoke up, his voice small. Bryce will be suspended immediately pending an investigation. That's a start, Nathan replied, but it's not enough. Your guests deserve better. My family deserves better. Helen nodded reluctantly. We'll handle this, Mr. Anderson. I assure you, changes will be made. Nathan stood, his towering presence dominating the room. See that they are. Vanessa followed him out of the office, her posture as strong as his. As they stepped into the hallway, she turned to him and smiled faintly. You're still working on vacation, huh? Nathan chuckled. Some things are worth it. A new chapter. Later that afternoon, as the Andersons lounged together on the beach, the resort manager approached them with an update. Bryce had been fired, Gregory Mills was under review, and the resort was beginning an overhaul of its security policies. I hope this can begin to repair the damage done, Helen Crowe said sincerely. Actions speak louder than words, Vanessa replied, but this is a good start. As Helen walked away, Nathan leaned back in his chair, watching Lucas and Mia build sandcastles near the water. The events of the past few days had been exhausting, but they had also served as a reminder of why he and Vanessa fought for justice in their careers and their lives. Hey, Dad, Lucas called from the shoreline. Come help us with this castle. Nathan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'm on my way. As he jolted toward his kids, Vanessa watched him with admiration. The man who could take on the world and still make time for his family. The waves rolled in gently, carrying with them a sense of peace. This time, it felt earned. Justice served and a lesson for the future. The resort felt noticeably different in the days that followed. Gone was the lingering tension that had shattered the Anderson family since the moment they arrived. The firing of Bryce Carson had sent a clear message, and the abrupt change in attitude from the staff was palpable. Guests who had witnessed the altercation whispered about what had happened, and word began spreading across the resort. The Andersons were no longer just another family on vacation. They were now a symbol of quiet resilience and justice. But Nathan wasn't done yet. To him, holding one man accountable wasn't enough. The deeper problem, the one he had uncovered about Simmons Security and the systemic issues it perpetuated, needed to be addressed at a larger scale. The call to action. On their final evening at the resort, Nathan sat in the room's small study nook, a cup of coffee beside him as he stared at his laptop screen. An idea had taken root in his mind, one that combined his professional expertise with his growing anger at the incident. He typed out an email to his boss at the bureau, outlining what had occurred at the resort and providing the damning evidence against Simmons Security. Vanessa leaned against the doorway, watching him work. You're not going to let this go, are you? She asked, her voice soft with admiration. Nathan looked up and shook his head. Not this time. This isn't just about us. It's about every family who's ever been treated like they don't belong. Bryce was just one symptom of a much larger problem. Vanessa walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. What's the plan? I'm going to recommend a formal investigation into Simmons Security, Nathan replied. Their pattern of misconduct isn't an accident, it's a culture. If we can expose them, it'll prevent them from doing this to someone else. Vanessa smiled faintly. I married the right man. Nathan reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. We both fight for justice in our own ways. Vanessa's phone buzzed on the desk. She picked it up and chuckled. Look at this. On her screen was a message from one of her lawyer colleagues back home, linking to a post that had already begun circulating online. Someone at the resort had uploaded a video of Bryce confronting the Anderson family, followed by the moment Nathan revealed his FBI badge. The caption read, "Racist guard picks the wrong family to harass. Dad is an FBI agent." It had gone viral. I didn't expect it to blow up like this, Nathan said, raising an eyebrow. Good, Vanessa replied. Let people see what happens when someone tries to demean others because of their bias. Maybe next time they'll think twice. A public reckoning. By the time the Andersons boarded their flight home the next morning, the story had spread beyond the confines of the resort. News outlets picked up the viral video, and discussions about racial profiling and injustice flooded social media. Nathan's calm but powerful confrontation resonated with thousands of people who had faced similar experiences. As the plane cruised above the clouds, Lucas sat beside his father, scrolling through his phone. Dad, people are calling you a hero online, he said, showing Nathan a headline. Nathan smiled faintly but shook his head. I'm no hero, Lucas. I just stood up for what's right. Lucas tilted his head thoughtfully. But you didn't let them get away with it. That's what heroes do, right? Nathan's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his son. Being a hero doesn't mean you wear a cape or save the world, he said gently. Sometimes it just means standing up when others can't or won't. Lucas nodded, his expression contemplative. I want to be like you when I grow up. Nathan placed his hand on his son's shoulder. You'll be better than me, son. Back to reality. When the Andersons returned home, Nathan didn't waste time. Within days, the formal recommendation for an investigation into Simmons' security landed on his supervisor's desk. It didn't take long for the FBI to open a probe, uncovering years of hidden complaints, settlements, and violations. News of the investigation became public, forcing the resort to release an official statement condemning the behavior of the guards and announcing they had cut ties with Simmons' security. The company itself faced public scrutiny, and its owner, Paul Simmons, was summoned for questioning by federal investigators. Vanessa, ever the fighter for justice, was already working on her own case. Alongside other lawyers, she began preparing a class action lawsuit against Simmons Security on behalf of individuals who had been harassed, profiled, or discriminated against by its employees. This isn't just about one company, Vanessa said one evening as she and Nathan sat in their living room. It's about making sure this kind of behavior stops everywhere. Nathan nodded, his admiration for her growing as it always did. You're going to change lives, Vanessa. She smiled. We both are. The ripple effect. Weeks later, Vanessa received an unexpected email from a mother who had seen the viral video of their confrontation. The email was short but deeply moving. Thank you for standing up. My family went through something similar, but we didn't have the power to fight back. Seeing you and your husband do what you did gave me hope. You reminded us that we're not alone. Vanessa's eyes welled with tears as she read the message aloud to Nathan. That's why we do this, Nathan said softly. For people like her. The Anderson children, too, were learning powerful lessons from the experience. Lucas, inspired by his father's strength, began writing a school essay about standing up against injustice. Mia, young as she was, proudly told her friends that her dad was a real-life hero. A vacation to remember. Months later, Nathan and Vanessa sat on their back porch, watching the sunset. Their lives had returned to normal, or as normal as they could be for a lawyer and an FBI agent, but something had changed. That vacation didn't turn out the way we expected, Vanessa said with a small laugh. Nathan chuckled. No, it didn't, but I wouldn't change a thing. Vanessa looked at him with curiosity. Why not? Because it reminded us of what matters, Nathan replied. Our family, our principles, and the fact that sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, you don't just change your own life, you change others too. Vanessa smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. We'll take a proper vacation next year, she said playfully. Nathan grinned. As long as it's somewhere quiet, I could use a break. For the Andersons, the vacation that had started as a nightmare had become a powerful story of courage, resilience, and justice. It wasn't the vacation they had planned, but it was one they would never forget, a story they could share for generations to come.